You're listening to The Psychedelic Couch. Before we delve into today's episode, which includes conversation around psychedelics, we want to remind our listeners that the use of illicit drugs carries significant risks and legal consequences. Psychedelic substances, including but not limited to LSD, psilocybin, DMT, and MDMA, are classified as illegal in many countries, including here in the UK. The possession, distribution, and consumption of these substances can result in legal penalties, including fines and imprisonment. Furthermore, the use of psychedelics can have profound effects on one's mental and physical health. While some individuals report positive experiences, such as expanded consciousness and therapeutic benefits, others may experience negative effects, such as anxiety, paranoia, and psychosis. These substances can also interact unpredictably with medications and exacerbate underlying mental health conditions. They are also not suitable for anyone under the age of 25. It's essential to approach the topic of psychedelics with caution and responsibility. The views and experiences shared in this podcast are for informational purposes only and should not be interpreted as encouragement or advocacy for the use of illegal substances. If you or someone you know is struggling with substance abuse, we encourage you to seek support from qualified healthcare professionals or local addiction support services. With that said, let's proceed with today's episode, keeping in mind the importance of informed discussion and harm reduction. Linda Zurak is a highly experienced and dedicated professional in the field of somatic movement therapy and embodied teaching. With over 25 years of experience, she has a deep understanding of the intrinsic connection between mental, physical, and emotional well-being. Her primary goal is to empower individuals to surpass their perceived limitations and live life to the fullest. Through her trauma-informed approach, Linda helps people identify and overcome the various blocks that hinder their vibrancy, empowerment, and freedom. She believes in the innate wisdom of the body and works to facilitate reconnection between individuals and their bodily intelligence. In essence, Linda's holistic approach to somatic movement therapy and embodied teaching fosters profound personal growth, leading individuals to live with greater authenticity, vitality, and fulfillment. Welcome, Linda.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, I'm so pleased to have you here today, Linda.
Thank you.
You know, we've known each other, I was thinking, it's about 7 years?
At least, yeah.
At least 7 years, yeah, maybe longer. And have worked together, and I have learned so much from you personally and professionally. So I thought there was no better guest than having you come and speak about somatic therapy.
Thank you.
So maybe we could start just by explaining to people what it is. How is it different to traditional talk therapy?
I think the easiest way to say it is, in the therapeutic world, we say that talk therapy is a top-down approach, meaning we're focusing on the mind, the thought, speaking, talking about experiences. And in somatic therapy, we say it's a bottom-up approach where we're approaching what we're working with through the physicality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's, really important about that is often people can say, yeah, I'm fine, I'm good, everything's okay. The brain and the mind can cope with a lot and can seem okay. But then the body, when we look at the body, it holds a different reality. There can be loads of tension held in the body. There can be ways that the person isn't present in their body. So there's, I like to say, a disconnect between what the head says and what the body tells me.
Mm-hmm. And are you noticing or seeing that in terms of tightness, tension, pain?
It's a little bit of everything. I would say definitely the tension. So the muscular tension is how we look at it is a form of armoring or protection. Somebody has really rounded shoulders. It can mean that they text a lot, but it also can mean that they're protecting their heart, or there's a way that their life has been such that there's a bit of resignation or a way that they live life that shows up in their body and their physicality. Mm-hmm. And another way is, do they breathe? How do they speak? Do they look comfortable in themselves? Do they have presence when they come into the room, or do they feel, I think we all can know some people that seem they're not really there, or we say their head is up in the clouds. So that would be maybe a version of not being in the body. So all those things show up when somebody comes into a room or into contact with another person.
So almost from the moment they enter,
Mm-hmm.
you can read their body, their language. I
Yeah.
guess you're
Yeah.
feeling what you're experiencing in your own
Yes.
system.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does somatic therapy address that connection then between the physical, emotional, and psychological?
Hmm. I suppose for most people, when they come to somatic therapy, it's usually because they've either done a lot of coaching or they've done a lot of talk therapy, and there's some way that it's been beneficial, and then they can sense there's something more, or there's another level that they need to work at. Usually, they have an idea that it's through the body. Either somebody has told them, maybe a body worker, or they have some sense of it, or because somatic is such a buzzword now, they just have this idea like, yeah, maybe I need to explore something through the body. So it's a way that they know intuitively that there's a connection. And then once we start working through the body, they can really sense, oh, wow, this is the first time I use my body to experience life. And certainly, like in the relational field, that we experience physically what happens in us internally. And that's a huge shift for people. Even now in our conversation, right? My focus can be all on you, right? I can be forward in my seat and I'm all focused on you, but then I'm not aware of what's happening inside me.
Uh, uh.
And I think that's so much of what comes up in relationship, right?
So it's about holding both spaces, right? Being in contact with the other, being able to hold their attention or have a dialogue, but also be remaining in your body, noticing what's
Yes.
happening, reading that kind of, and then would you go to that tension? So for example, right now in this conversation, how are you doing that?
Well, right now, what I do for myself, and it's probably one of the first things I teach people, especially when we're doing Zoom sessions, is to lean back in your chair and feel your back and feel your feet on the floor and feel that you're over there in yourself and I'm over here in myself. And then in between us is this relational field. And simply in leaning back, for a lot of people, that brings up discomfort, or they say, oh, I feel quite rude, that I'm not paying enough attention. So already it brings a lot into the conversation.
That is interesting, isn't it? The difference between leaning forward. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like almost, I don't know, if I feel almost like a puppy dog here
Yeah.
waiting. Actually, that's the difference. And then sitting back, I actually feel more in my kind of adult centered space.
And I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong, but
Mm.
let's say if you're in a business meeting or you're on a first date or you're having a difficult conversation, the more you can be in your own energy and in your own body, the less triggered you're going to be by the other person. Or if you sense there's a trigger coming up, you will be able to address it sooner rather than later because you are in your what we call inner landscape.
So you're grounded, you're in your own space, and it feels like almost there's an extension of time. Is that right, Linda? Is that what you're saying? That when
It
you're
does feel
closer,
like time slows
it
down.
it's or there's this just pause to just notice how the words or what our dialogue, for example, is saying, and just contain, gather myself, and respond from a, I don't know, from a slower pace, from a
Yes.
slower, more adult
Hmm.
centered place.
Hmm. And we would call that attunement, in somatic therapy. So I'm tuned into what's going on in me. And because I'm tuned into me, I can tune into you and how you're responding to my words. So if I start to talk really fast and loud, that's going to have a different effect on you
Yeah.
than when I speak slower and I'm connected to myself.
Mm. Yeah, can you tell us more about your journey? How did you
Hmm.
find somatic work and how has it really helped you on your personal journey?
Yeah. Well, I suppose I'm not so different from my ideal client. I did years of personal development and therapy, and it was all really beneficial. And because I was teaching movement for such a long time, I could really see how people had difficulty in their bodies. And I had a sense it wasn't just physical. I always thought, why can't they do what I'm asking? Or why is it so difficult to work with this person? And now in hindsight, I can see it's because they were dissociated or there was something happening in their nervous system that I didn't know about. And so I was running a Pilates teacher training program, and one of my students was a somatic therapist. And when she shared about what she did, I just really intuitively knew that that's the missing piece for me. And so, we're now very good friends. And in a way, she completed my training, I completed her training. And so that really informed how I work with movement and how I worked with my clients. And it really affected all areas of my life, and certainly my own history and being able to maybe metabolize it. That's what I say. We have a lot of cognitive knowledge. I think we've never lived in a time where people are so aware of their stuff. But the awareness doesn't necessarily translate into a difference in relating.
Yeah, or it's a cognitive awareness
Yes, yes,
rather than an embodied one.
exactly.
Um, yeah, and that really resonates what you say. I mean, we've had conversations about this, that there's so far that talking therapy takes you, and especially as a sex therapist. And I've
Yes,
referred clients to
yes.
you that, really needing them to have that embodied experience, and working with someone where touch is permissible, and you can then really guide them into the body is so useful. Yeah, what role does trauma and stress play, in somatic therapy?
Hmm.
How do you approach that with clients?
Well, I think we all can feel that stress has an impact on the body. There's a contraction when we are stressed. Our breathing is more shallow. Our muscles are tighter. We almost get like a tunnel vision. So the contraction also happens when we experience trauma. There's a way that we either freeze a part of ourselves to survive, or we disconnect from a part of ourselves. So all of that, when worked through the body, starts to open or expand the body in a way that is different than talking about something. And there are times when a person doesn't remember something, but when we do specific movement and breath work, because their body remembers something that they have forgotten, their body will start to move in a way that brings up a memory or brings up something that they haven't ever thought about, that they put away in their subconscious somewhere. And so it's quite fascinating, both for the person and for me, to see what happens when we just allow the body the space to tell its story in a way.
Absolutely. And tell us about a session, because I'm thinking about, there was a particular one that we did, um, you know, and, and it was through the shaking. You had me in a almost like a sort of squat against the wall, and that induced this shaking, which then allowed me almost the state of consciousness change. That was a way in, um, to then start processing what was underneath. Just explain a little bit about,
Yeah.
how it works.
Well, I would say each person, just to put it so simply, each person's nervous system has a different capacity to hold stress and to contain experiences, contain emotion. Some people have a high level, so they can go through life holding a lot and carrying a lot of stress and tension and even trauma. And some bodies have less ability to hold that, to tolerate that amount of stress in the system. So it really depends on the structure of the person, their emotional makeup, their physical strength, how much they can tolerate in terms of, I like to say it's like bleeding the radiator. So there's certain movements that we can do to elicit and invite a little bit of releasing that tension. And there are lots of ways to do that that can be very gentle, or they can be quite big and strong. And I don't want to say cathartic. It can be, but again, I like to work within the person's capacity to stay present in the work. So it's so individual.
Uh, uh,
So that goes, it's individual person to person, and there's specific exercises, but it's not like I come in with, like, now we're going to do this movement so that you can have this result. It really happens intuitively.
but is there something about the shaking? Because that's my experience, and what's been fascinating is almost since you helped me find that place,
Hmm,
it
hmm.
now will come up naturally, especially in my Kundalini practice. I
Yes,
will notice,
yes.
and breath work, I'll notice the shake starts, and then I just get out the way and let the body kind of unravel, unfurl.
Beautiful.
Is that a common way in, or is
It
that?
is. It is. So we could say that where we have stored stress and trauma, the part of us becomes a little bit frozen. And so when that shaking starts to occur, it's almost like a defrosting of that part of us that is held, the freezing to make it through life, to make it through the day. And so it almost allows you to have to inhabit more of your body because you don't have these pockets that are held and frozen. We all have those pockets inside of ourselves. So as you start to allow the shaking in a gentle way, it starts to unblock, like almost like a clog in the drain. It unblocks the system so that the shaking does come naturally. And if you think about children, right, when we're young, we're so full of energy and excitation that we can't sit still, right? So when daddy comes home and a little girl says, daddy, I'm so excited, look what I did, that's arousal and excitation. And when that gets blocked, that energy stays in the system. So what we're doing is we're just allowing it to exit in a way that feels to us so foreign because we spent so much of our life blocking that energy, because that's what we're taught. So our aliveness gets conditioned out of us. Sit still, pay attention. It's so unnatural for children to sit still. I mean, they need to move because they have a lot of energy running through their system because they're not yet blocked like we are when we're adults.
Absolutely. And I remember you saying to me, when the kids experience anger, get a cushion, let them punch it out.
Yeah.
Teach them from a young age that it's okay. This is energy, energy and motion. Just allow it to be expressed. And once that's happened, that the moment's over, the body has been allowed to process that.
Exactly. It's not that different than an orgasm. You wouldn't go and have foreplay for 5 months and never release because you would feel odd. There would be a lot of energy buzzing in your system that doesn't have any release. So we could say it's a form of arousal, towards life, towards our environment, and then it never gets any attention or it doesn't have a pathway out.
Are there any, specific techniques or interventions that you could explain to listeners, any doable things that people can start to weave into their lives?
Well, I would say, the first thing that we shared is the awareness of your body. So a lot of people don't even know that there's something below the head, because we so much live in this head bubble. So anything that you can do to connect with your body in a way that you're in your body, it's not the same as working out, because I know that a lot of people can work out and zone out, right? You can be on the treadmill, zoning out, thinking about something else. You're not actually embodied. Or you're at the gym or you're at Pilates or yoga and you're thinking about something else. So it's different to think about the body than it is to inhabit. So just a simple practice of either tapping different parts of your body or brushing with your hands. Dry brushing is a great way to feel, oh, I have the skin that envelops my whole body. That's my boundary between me and the world. That's something that we're not used to. And then starting to sense our internal experience. Oh, what's happening in me? So by physically sitting back in our chair, you can practice it at work. You can practice it when you're out with friends at lunch. It's an experience that starts to then give you information about what's happening in you, right? Because we're constantly affected by what's happening around us. And maybe noticing when you're talking really fast, that also will take you out of your body, more into your head. Noticing if you don't breathe. I work with a lot of movement teachers. It's also easy. That's a whole other topic, in the fitness world and movement, to talk at people, tell them what to do, and not receive the information that their body is giving us.
Yeah, tell us more about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's a huge untapped market, so to speak, because I think somatic work is really becoming big in the medical field, in coaching. I love seeing how it's showing up in parenting. And then because, of course, my history is movement, I can really see how there's a way that people are talked at and told what to do. So it's like energetically, the energy is just going one way. It's going from the teacher or instructor to the person. So if that teacher or instructor isn't grounded and inhabiting their own body, they can't sense how that person is receiving their instruction. They can't sense like, oh my God, they're totally checked out. Oh, that's why I'm not getting the result I want. Or, wow, I can see that they really hate this exercise. So they're doing it, but internally they're cursing me, or they're not wanting to get the results. So there's a lot that's happening.
Do you know, as you said that, I remembered I did some Bikram classes 25 years ago. And, you know, this huge room with this, you know, intense temperature, sweaty bodies, and these very strict kind of postures. And I remember thinking, but my body doesn't want to do this. And there was
Yes.
kind of no option. This is what you've got to do. This is what Bikram says. And I remember kind of
Yes.
almost falling out with yoga at that time, thinking this can't be right. This is totally going against my intuitive wisdom as to what my body feels like it needs to be doing in this moment.
Yes. Yes. And certainly in trauma work, and I would say as movement people, movement teachers, we don't have on our intake form, do you have trauma? So we can be working with a lot of people that carry trauma that we don't know about. And so how you would speak to somebody that has experienced trauma is different. The language would be different. It would be more invitational, because when somebody has experienced trauma, there's a way that their choice was taken away from them in that moment in what they experienced. So in working with them, invitational language is so empowering. So if it feels right for you, I'm going to invite you to do this, right? Then they get to choose what feels right for them. They get to say yes or no. And that's very empowering. So it's a different language that would be used. There's different work that I would ensure as a practitioner. You know, I have to be really grounded and create a safe space if I know that I'm working with somebody who has that history, whether they're coming for therapy or movement. It doesn't matter, because the history in the body is the same.
It's really interesting as you say that. I wonder then, when people don't take that approach, you know, if you're doing a gym class or seeing a personal trainer and, you know, working on the basis that that instructor is not aware of your trauma history, you know, what the relationship is to injury then.
Right.
To further
That's a good
injury.
question.
Wouldn't that be
Sure.
fascinating to know then?
Absolutely. Well, think about it. If I'm checked out, because let's say, especially in Pilates, there's a lot of postures where you're lying down, you have your legs in straps, you're opening your legs. So if somebody has trauma, that's a very intimate position. And if there's somebody standing opposite you looking at your pelvis, I mean, that's very invasive. So they can check out. And if they're in a position that where they could hurt themselves, they will.
You
Because
just
if I'm not versed in seeing that they've checked out, I'll just continue telling them what to do. And then, oops, they fell, or oops, this happened. And it's very easy for that to happen.
or the body's response, you know, being a result of the kind of trauma signal turning on.
Yes, yes. So then the person checks out, the instructor or teacher gets irritated, because they're like, why aren't they doing what I'm telling them to do? Not recognizing they've checked out, you know, a long time ago, you know, maybe like from the start of the session.
Right.
So rather than saying, you know, if you were more trauma informed, you could say, okay, let's take a minute and I want you to check into your body, and I'm just checking in. How is it for you? Are you here with me? Or, you know, like, it's so okay to name that, not as there's something wrong, but to acknowledge and validate their experience.
Yeah, would you name it if you
I
noticed that?
would, yeah.
You would say, "Oh, I noticed this happened.
Yeah, I would,
What's going
because
on
in
for
a
you?"
way they know that they've checked out, and somebody recognizing that is a validation. Obviously, I'm going to say it in a way that is affirming, not in a way that is shaming.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And how I imagine infrequently that happens.
Yes, yes. So it's a shame, because yeah, as a teacher, as a movement teacher, there's, you know, you give a lot of your energy and you care about people and you want them to have a good experience. And then if you don't know why it's not happening, that can be very frustrating. And maybe you question then yourself, oh, maybe I'm not a good teacher, I'm not a good instructor, and we're just lacking some knowledge.
Yeah, so tell us more about the importance of that therapeutic relationship.
Mm. I would say it's the most important, certainly in any kind of therapy, and certainly again if there's a trauma history, because I think we can agree that our trauma is created in relationship. You know, if you were born and living under a rock your whole life, you wouldn't have any interaction with people, you wouldn't have any wounding. So because the wounding occurs in relationship, the relationship that a client has with a therapist provides such a huge opportunity for healing. And if I can be really specific, for example, if you grew up and you were never allowed to be angry with your mother. I'm saying mother because I'm a female therapist, or an authority figure at school, or somebody in the church. If you could never express your anger or dislike for something, and I know that about you, and in the therapeutic setting, I create a setting where it's safe for you to start expressing that, that's a huge visceral shift for the person. They're going to feel that in their organs. They're going to feel the fear of how it's not okay to do that because that's embedded in their cells. So as we work through that slowly and they feel, oh, wow, I said something that I didn't like and nothing bad happened, that registers on a cellular level in a way that they already know that intellectually. They're an adult. They know, yes, of course, I should be able to say whatever I like. But the nervous system responds in a different way.
Yeah, and the body's having a different experience in that moment.
Yes. Yeah. So our relationship and creating the safety and trust and it's really experiential. And certainly when I work in groups, it's so powerful because sometimes one to one, they could say, well, I'm paying you, so you have to say I'm doing well, or you have to make it good for me. But when it's a group and people get various feedback from different people, then they have to say, okay, I can see that this is a different truth than what I carry in my body.
Yeah.
That I've shown my anger, I've said things I would never say, nobody's left the room, they're still here, we're still in connection. That's a very affirming experience for the nervous system.
And I'm thinking about when we worked together, when we started working together many, many years ago, when I had the pain in my shoulder, just having you hold it and move it in a way that felt safe. I suddenly felt safe in my body. Because when there is that constant pain, it's dangerous, it's scary. There's
Yes.
this aversion, you want it to go away. So the body, or that particular part of my body, didn't feel safe. So there was something so soothing about you holding it and having me move in a way where there wasn't pain, that felt freeing and safe. And as you say, nurturing. It felt very contained and allowed me to see that there was another way, that there is a
Yes.
way that I can move that doesn't hurt.
Yes. It's like a record being stuck in a loop. Now I'm showing my age, right? It gets stuck in a groove. And so when the brain is stuck in that groove, if my shoulder hurts when I move it, when it has had the experience of the shoulder moving without pain, then it's almost like a new groove is created. So we're trying to repattern that truth in the brain and in the body.
Can you share any other like profound stories of healing?
Well, I would say in general, it's just really, although I've been doing this for a long time, it never ceases to amaze me how much, if we just give the body the space, how much it can reveal. And I think why that's so useful is because a lot of us, in this culture where we prioritize intellect and the mind and understanding and labeling, when you come into the body and you give yourself permission to put that aside, the mind really calms down. It's very fascinating. So when you just allow the body to do what it wants to do, and that's very strange for people. I had a small group last night, and what we do is we just allow the body to move as it likes. And for most people, that's so strange because we're always being told what to do if we go to an exercise class or if we go to a movement class. There's an instructor, they say, do this, do that. And there's a way that our body might want to move to release stress, to release something that we're holding. And the more that we allow that, the more whatever is at the surface comes up. So there might be something that the body wants to let go of, but because it never has that space, it stays stuck in the system, so to speak. So I would say that's often what happens. And then obviously with that comes some either memory or conversation. And I always want to relate that to everyday life. So how does that affect you in everyday life? How does this historical truth that seems real to you, how does it affect your relationships? How does it affect you at work? And then when we can articulate that and start to work differently through the body and through different skills, then how people interact in the world is different. It's a huge thing. It's almost like a dismantling of everything that they told you need to be.
Exactly, and a reconnecting. with everything that you intrinsically are.
Yeah, I always say, look at children, right? We're all born the same. We're born free and alive and loving and open. And then it starts to shut down because, as we now know, it's getting to be more common knowledge. A child will always choose connection over authenticity, right? So if I know that mommy doesn't like me to be upset or daddy gets frustrated when I do this, I'm not going to do that. And how I don't do that is to stop breathing or clench my muscles or do something physical, because that's the quickest way to stop the energy moving through our system.
Yeah. What role, Linda, do you think other expanded states play on somatic healing? So psychedelics or meditation, breath work.
Well, I think people already do that. For example, people go to breath work or they go to a yoga class or they go to meditation. But I think the difference is we're working with an intention. So you'll often hear people say, oh, I went to a yoga class and then I was crying after, and they might not know why. It might be confusing to them. It might be scary. But what we're doing is we're bringing those modalities in with an intentional way of working through the body. So if I look at a body and I see where they're holding their tension, we might do specific breath work, specific movements to dismantle a little bit of the armoring. We would call it muscular armoring that's protecting the heart or is protecting something from coming out, some expression of emotion or past experiences. So I would say it's more intentional.
Okay. So it kind of with intention that you're working together to go there. So the client will say to you, you know, there's a, I don't know, an issue in my shoulder. Let's go into that space with awareness, kind of loving awareness, and then
Yes.
see what's there.
And compassionate inquiry, or it could be the opposite, where they come with an issue like, oh, I never have any money, or I have this experience of life. And then that will also be related to a part of the body. So we could also work it that way, that they come with something specific and then we work it through the physicality. So if they have challenges with money or never feeling safe or not being able to settle, that could be like an existential wound, which is located in, if we're going to talk about energy centers, in the root chakra. So when we work with the root chakra in a therapeutic way, that's the way they can inhabit that area and start to create that sense of safety and regulate their nervous system around those specific topics of money or grounding or belonging. So all of that is contained in the body.
Really? And do you work predominantly with women or men and women? Do you see differences in kind of gender presentation?
Yeah, I think I have a good combination also of men, because I think the work is quite physical and there's something about that that they enjoy. And I think it's a relief not to have to talk. As we know, women are much more verbal. And so I think it's a relief for men to come in and be able to move and make sounds, and maybe they hit something and they really can release this huge energy, and it's very relieving. So it's a different way of working. And I'm not saying I would work that way with everyone,
Mm.
but certainly if I have a big physical structure and they're very grounded and they're holding a lot, they can release a lot of energy in a way that brings them to their feelings.
And I was thinking how this kind of connects to sex and kind
Yes.
of healing in that space. Tell us more about that.
Well, I think so much of it has to do with our history, whether it's our home life or cultural or societal. So let's say if I have somebody that I'm working with, I'd like to be aware of their background, of their culture, of their religion, because if we're working through the body and they have issues about connecting with their body, or they've been shamed about their body and sex, then obviously we need to respect that and work accordingly. And I think what happens is when we think of sexuality, there's something around that that is a very loaded experience. So I like to say aliveness, because our energy is our aliveness. We might use it for sex, but we can also use it for creativity. So somehow, if we move away from saying sexuality and we say aliveness, how do you kill your aliveness? How did you put it away? How has it been shamed? That somehow is more accessible to people.
So aliveness rather than kind of eroticism.
Yes, because words have a big impact, because if I have somebody who's had a very religious upbringing and sex was shamed and don't do that and don't touch yourself and it's only for marriage and there can be a lot that comes up using those words. So if we play with words, it has a very different impact.
Yeah.
It's the same as if I say, oh, I'm really nervous about talking to you today, or I could say, I'm so excited. Right? My body responds differently to those words. So aliveness is really the goal. And what you do with that. And I think in the Western world, we have this idea, oh, if I'm sexually aroused, I have to go and sleep with someone. I have to do something with that energy rather than, whoa, I have a lot of energy in my pelvis. I can circulate that through my system. I can use it to go through my day. We're not versed in that modality.
And I suppose the other way round, when people are experiencing a lack of desire or loss of desire, actually kind of noticing, what is that aliveness? What is that aliveness in your system? I can feel the wind in my hair or the touch of my clothes on my skin. When we are in the body, that can then lead us into a space where, we can start to feel that awakening.
Yes. And I think that also gets confused. We confuse sensuality with sexuality. So when I say sensuality, I say we're experiencing life through the senses. So I almost say like our spidey senses. When you're walking down the street and the hair in the back of your neck stands up, that's information. Yeah. But if you're not in your body, you won't have that experience. So the more you inhabit your inner landscape, the more you can sense. You're in a meeting or you're on a date and they're saying the right things, but something feels off. So when you are attuned to your insides, you can use that to your benefit in any experience. Like something felt off. So once I had that with a client, it was a movement client, and we had a lovely session, but I felt that something was off. I didn't know what. And then I just messaged him and I said, hey, I'm just checking in. Are you okay after our session? And it turned out she wasn't okay. So when we can learn to trust that, then we don't have to go looking for external validation, like, oh, what do you think I should do? What about this? And we have this grounding in our truth and this trusting of our wisdom in our physicality that makes us feel just more relaxed and more secure. And I think we really saw that during the pandemic. The more you were externally focused, watching the news, watching what's happening, the less you were in your body. And so, it's almost like a tidal wave takes you over and you lose your ground. So I think there's a fine balance between, okay, I'm going to stay rooted in my body and my truth and notice what's happening in the world and what feels true for me and what's my truth and what works for me in the situation.
Yeah. Are there any kind of simple grounding techniques that you use in your kind of daily practice or?
Well, I always give people exercises, if you're out somewhere where obviously you can't now stand up and do a grounding exercise, go to the loo and just shake your body. Just shake your body and stomp your feet. And that's a very quick way to come into your body, or lean against the wall in a squat position, and just breathe and bring your attention to your lower body, because what we're doing is we're playing with the energy, right? When people have stress or anxiety, that energy goes up. We can feel it, right? You get overwhelmed. The overwhelm happens in the head and in the mind and in the upper body. So when you come and lean against the wall and feel the tension in your legs, the muscles tensing, your attention goes to where the pain is, right? You're no longer in your head and anxious and worried about whatever was there before. So your attention will naturally go to the physical sensation and you breathe, and that immediately brings you to a grounded place.
And so easy, right? And quick.
Yes. It has to be practical.
Yeah.
It has to be practical. Otherwise, I don't tell people you must do an hour of something a day, because that's not realistic. So we need little pockets of somatic hacks, that we can use anywhere in the day. And again, the more you do that, the more you can track what's happening in relationships. So if we're having a conversation and I start to feel, uh-oh, there's something brewing in my system, which when I work enough in inhabiting myself, I know that's a trigger about to happen. I can track it. I can excuse myself. I can go to the loo. If there's emotion there, I can have a cry or I can stomp my feet. And then I can come back to the situation and continue the interaction without putting all of that on the other person.
Absolutely. And you're keeping yourself in that window of tolerance without kind of becoming hyper aroused.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's the goal. Like, it's not that nobody is always regulated. That's impossible. You know, if you have a healthy nervous system, it means you're able to go through the ups and downs and the ebb and flow and expansion and contraction and witness what's happening. And even if you have a argument with somebody and you blow up later, you can reflect and recognize why that happened and own what part of it is yours, you know, in terms of, oh, yeah, when you talk to me like that, it's just like my mother. And it just brings up all this stuff, or it reminds me of that teacher that, you know, really humiliated me. And so you can have that awareness, share it with the person, and then apologize for, you know, being that way with them because they were just being how they are. Yeah.
Mm. But as you say, the physiological responses will happen before that point where the explosion takes
Yes.
place. So starting to notice, my heart's beating faster, I'm getting a little bit clammy, really check into the physical response before that. And you can then you're then able to read it or regulate or do what you need
Yeah.
to do to bring yourself back into a calm.
Yeah. And it's so easy said in this moment, you know, but it's so quick. So I would say, especially if you know there's a person that you have difficulty around, like you go to your in-laws or maybe your family, and you know you have this thing, this conversation that always happens that stresses you out, then especially in those environments, uh, you can do some grounding before you go and really bring the awareness and tracking what's happening inside. And that's a skill. That's a skill that we teach and that people have to consistently practice because we're not taught about energy in relationship, which is so crazy because we are physical matter, but we're also energy.
Mm.
So what I'm doing with my energy and what you're doing with yours is we're affecting each other.
Yeah, noticing. So I was just thinking with the kids, or as you started off saying,
Yes.
when we start talking faster and higher,
Yeah.
our body's having this experience. So noticing, checking in and noticing how fast you're talking, how the pitch is changing. And with my daughter, we have this game where when she starts experiencing it, so she can hear and start feeling that it's almost like a rushing. So that tendency, it's a kind of come on, come on, come on, we've got to go, is ultimately what I'm saying. So there's fear in me that we're going to be late. So when I'm starting to do that and she notices it, she just says patience. And that's the trigger
Oh,
word. It's almost like let's name it. So when she says patience in that way, that is enough for me to know, oh, thanks. That's the trigger for
amazing.
me to say, let's just slow this down. Because
Amazing.
I know the impact it's having on her, and everyone else. So it's almost, if we can't always be the detective ourselves because we are kind of caught in the moment with the stress or whatever is
Mm-hmm.
happening, what is it that we can do? What agreements can we have with the people around us to be able to name it?
Yeah. And I think in a relationship, it's so fundamental. I can't tell you how many times an issue in a relationship is really nervous system dysregulation, you know, and to be able to talk about that and, like you said, with your child or with your partner, say, hey, when this happens, you know, I check out and I can't interact with you. So could we make an agreement that if I notice that starting to happen in you, that I give you the word or I give you some signal that you can be aware of it and then we can take a break because I want to stay connected with you. And in that moment, I can't stay connected with you. I go into freeze. So that's a huge because it's in service of the connection. It's not me saying, you know, you really yell all the time. And when you do that, it really doesn't work. And you need to work on yourself. That's a very different
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, absolutely. But when everyone can start noticing what's happening in their system and where they're going and name it, so we all have code words, then we can just keep ourselves more regulated or,
It's
take a break.
incredible. Yeah. And with children, I think that's one of the blessings, one of the many blessings of somatic work becoming more mainstream. Rather than saying, oh, my child is having a tantrum and they're making me crazy, that is an old way of looking at it. When we know, oh my God, they're so dysregulated, they have so much energy running through their system, they don't know what to do. So when I look at it that way, then I know, okay, I need to take a breath. We're in the queue at the store. I need to take a breath. I need to come down to their level. And maybe you can say, what is it that you need? What is it that you need right now? And they might say, I need a hug,
Then
or I need a glass of water. They'll know, but it's not how we're used to interacting with children. Or we say, stop crying, or there's a reason that they're crying because they don't know about emotion. They don't know what to do with all of this energy that's moving through them. And if the adults don't know what to do, then nobody's in charge.
exactly. And if they don't know, if you're talking with a child, then give them an idea. Like, I noticed that you're really angry and you're shouting and screaming, and this isn't really like you. So I'm wondering if today was really scary, or is this because tomorrow you've got this test? And often what will happen is the anger is replaced with tears, and it's a you're right, because they don't know yet. They don't know. They just know that they're dysregulated and they're just angry, and it's because you won't, I don't know, give me the other ice cream, or I don't
Yes.
know, play on the iPad. But actually just kind of acknowledging this is what's happening in our environment at the moment. And I don't think it's to do with, the iPad. It's actually that you're
Yes.
scared, you're anxious, you're
Yeah. Remember, we're teaching them about emotion. And because we're not versed in emotion, it's not really the best inherited conversation that they're getting. And we're teaching them this means this and this means that. And when I work with people that come in and they right away say, I'm scared, I'm anxious, I'm this, I'm that, it doesn't necessarily help them because they become so associated with that label that there's no opening for anything else to occur. So the language of the body is sensation. So I could say, okay, what does that anxiety feel like? Does it feel like fluttering? Does it feel like squeezing? Do you sense it somewhere in your body? And once they can speak that way, like when we speak about the sensation, then the label isn't there and there's some more freedom around the experience.
Mm. How do you work with people that struggle with interception?
Good question. Well, I think first they have to become aware of their physicality, so having them touch their body with their own hands so that they can feel, okay, this is the outside of you, right? So there's an outside experience and then there's an inside experience. And how do you know if you're outside or inside? It's really, it can be like, okay, when you put your hand on your chest, can you feel from the inside that there is something on your chest? Can you sense that there's warmth there? So they're not used to being inside.
Yeah.
It's a very simplistic way of saying it,
Yeah.
but it's like when you're experiencing life from the inside out, it's very different than when you're outside experiencing life. It's much more stressful.
Yeah, I'm just thinking where, I've had clients before that will say, I just, I don't know if I'm aroused. Unless I have an erection, or, unless I'm watching porn, then I know I'm aroused, but I can't feel that internally. If you're asking them to connect with, like the heart and genitals, you'll
Mm-hmm.
notice it's a like, I can't. I'm in my head, or I'm watching porn, and there's nothing in between. It's almost that, okay, how can you just slowly grow that whispering or feeling that there is
Mm-hmm.
something starting to arouse, that it's not on or off?
Right, right. So it's like, yeah, and I think that's a big thing that we do is we kill desire. And, because I'm a middle-aged woman, if I can say it that way, I work a lot with women that lose their sex drive. So they say, oh, I have no sex drive. That's it. It's over. And I say, look, it's not about the sex, it's about your sensuality. So it's again the way that we collapse certain experiences. So just because you have an erection doesn't mean that you're aroused. You can have an erection because you have it. So what is arousal, or what is awakening the senses? It's about pleasure, sensation, feeling. If I scratch my arm, it's very different than if I gently brush my arm. Just doing that kind of exploration on the skin and on the body is conducive to some kind of arousal. But I think because we're used to arousal being only genital, we don't experience like, whoa, I'm so aroused. Every cell in my body is buzzing. I'm feeling life with all of my cells. We don't live like that.
Mm. And the feeling nothing can be the dissociation that you described. It's
Yes,
almost the cut
yes.
off. It's dangerous. It's shameful. I mustn't go there.
Yeah,
So I feel nothing.
exactly. So there is a way, the more that we do embodiment work, that it's almost like the internal tube or the blockages start to unravel. And, you know, an orgasm isn't only genital, it can be a full body orgasm when when we're unblocked energetically. But again, because we're not taught that, and certainly if porn is the main way that we learn about sex, which unfortunately these days it is, when we're conditioned that that's what it should look like, anything other than that is not good enough or not okay or wrong or not conducive to the result of an orgasm.
And it's not embodied, right?
No, no.
It's completely disconnected.
It's a performance, it's a goal oriented experience rather than, hey, how can we explore pleasure together? Like how do we explore what feels good? What do you like? It's a lot of times I give people that play work, like go home with your partner and set aside an evening where you can explore different types of touch because we don't do that.
And go into your own body, your own
Yes.
system.
Yeah. And if that feels like too much to do with another person, do it on your own. Touch different parts of your body and notice how does it feel on the inside. Are there some places where you prefer the touch? Are there some places that are warmer, that are colder, that have more sensation, that have less sensation? Because you have to know first before you're able to tell somebody else.
Absolutely. If I'm doing a sensate program with couples, I always start with the self-sensate.
Yes, exactly. So, very basic things. And again, it's not only for the bedroom, it's for everyday life so that I can have my senses online to navigate walking down the street at night, to sense, is there any danger around me? To know, is this a good choice for me to make because my gut is in agreement and my heart is in agreement. And I think that's also something that we're not versed in.
Yeah, that's almost taught out of us, right? By
Yes, yes. But
mainstream education.
children know. I always say, do you remember when you were little? I mean, I think everybody has had a similar experience. You go to some family gathering and your parents say, go and kiss Auntie so and so, or go and say hello to Uncle Joe. And you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. But you do because obviously you want to please your parents. But internally, you have an experience that there's something yucky about that person or something that puts you off, right? So right away, we know we are so in tune when we're little people. Or if a child comes to an adult and says, are you okay? They sense that there's something not okay. And if the adult says, yeah, I'm fine, but they're not fine, then the child is taught to doubt its internal experience. What you're sensing is not true. And I'm not suggesting that we tell our children what's going on with us, but you could say, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit sad. Sometimes I get sad, but I'm okay.
Well, those are the seeds of consent, right? That's how we start
Yes,
teaching that
yes,
to
exactly.
children. And I often say as well, if we've made plans and then it gets to that point and we really don't want to, we push through and we have to go, we've said we'll go, we
Yes,
have to go. Again, we're
yes,
teaching that I don't want to in this moment, but I'm told that I have to do it anyway. So modeling consent in that way by being really in tune with what you're experiencing and knowing what your yes is, being able to model your yes, being able to model the no. And I'm thinking again in play, always saying to the kids, is your fun for everyone? Does that person, do they look like they were having a good time? They're saying no. Now's
I
the
love
time to
that.
back off. Just really, it's so important, right? Because we just think, oh, my partner wants to have sex, I better do it.
Exactly.
So we
Yes.
don't learn, and it's so important that internally and in the relational dynamic that we can learn to
Yeah.
trust our
Yeah.
yeses and our nos.
And it doesn't have to be so black and white. So you could say, I'm not up for sex, but I could do like a makeout session with you. I'm up for that. Like there's no way that we've learned to negotiate in a fun way. I'm not really up for that right now, but maybe I could get in the mood. I'm willing to try, or I'm willing to make out and see where it leads. We're just not taught that art of communicating and having fun and saying, okay, you're there, I'm here. Can we meet somewhere in the middle?
Well, and because there's so misunderstanding, so much miseducation understanding about desire, we think that desire is spontaneous, but actually that's only one type of desire. And we know that in committed relationships, desire tends to show up in terms of responsive desire. If we have the conditions where touch or we might play, it's through that we then switch on the desire. So I often say to clients, it's a little bit like swimming, right? It's a cold winter's evening and you really don't want to take your clothes off and get in that pool. But actually, once you make the commitment and you've done a few laps, you're like, actually, I'm enjoying this. This is great. And when you get out, you think, that was awesome. Why don't I do it more? And that's normal. But we think that that's not
Yes,
sexy and that that's not what desire should be.
of course. Yeah. And certainly, like you said, in long-term relationships and as we age and we're living longer, it's not going to look the same all the
Mm.
time. You
Mm.
can't say, oh, but 5 years ago when we met, it was like this. But yeah, I'm not the same person. You're not the same person. Our physiology is not the same. And we didn't know anything.
We didn't know what was going to happen in the relationship. So I don't know if you're going
Exactly.
to call me back. That's exciting. The dopamine, phenylethylamine, all those wonderful chemicals are coursing through us.
Yeah, yeah, and I think also it has to do a lot with if we're stacking resentments against the person, we're not going to be so open to allowing them to be in our arousal field. It can be it's like a subconscious form of punishment. Like, no, I'm just not going to be turned on with you.
Mm,
So
mm.
it's very sneaky. All of those things where we don't communicate, resentments, or we don't know how to get our needs met, and we just expect the person to know, that all affects
Mm,
arousal and connection.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, what are some of the misconceptions about somatic therapy?
Well, I think what I see a lot in social media these days is, do these somatic exercises to lose weight, get a six pack, somatic exercise. I mean, it drives me crazy. Which is to say, it is true that through somatic work, your body can change. Because if you're holding a lot of emotion and you're holding your body a certain way to protect, as you start doing somatic work, it does change. You can let go of some weight, you can let go of some tension, but it's not going to give you a six pack, or there's a way that you can do these somatic exercises at home to release trauma. It's kind of like DIY, your own trauma work, which, of course, it will have an effect. You might do these exercises and you might have shaking and a response in your body and some emotion coming up. But I think, again, what we talked about is that wounding occurs in relationship. There's a way that you're almost reaffirming, I can only do this by myself. I can't be witnessed in my experienced by another person. So there's a huge healing element that gets missed. When you're able to show your emotion and be witnessed in a group or with another person, that is healing. If you weren't ever able to experience that as a child.
Well, it's in the relational space that the wounding takes place, right? So then it's in relationship that healing is.
Yes. So I think that makes me a bit weary. And I have had people that I've worked with that said, "Oh, I did this kind of online, trauma release work, and all these things happened, and I don't feel good." And they need some support. And it might be okay for some people, and it might not be okay for other people.
To needing to be held in that
Yes, yeah.
exploration.
On the one hand, it's great, and on the other hand, because people aren't versed in, what is it, and let's be honest, we all want a quick fix. If I could take a pill and never have to exercise, and I could eat whatever I want, I would. But it's not. It's not how it
Mm.
works.
Mm.
It's not. There's nothing that quick, and then you're not having the consciousness around it. So in the relational field, you can say, oh, wow, I notice when you look at me like that, this is what happens internally. And this is what I make up in my mind. And then I disconnect from you. That's very different than doing something by yourself to elicit that response in your body.
Well, and I guess it's a lifelong journey, right? It's how we learn to be in connection with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yes.
a kind of it's a continuous birthing, rebirthing
Yes.
experience. It's
Yeah.
not what
Yeah.
I've just got to do this and then it's done, and I can sit in my kind of unhealthy space of, you know, belief or whatever that might be. It's just an ongoing unfurling.
Yeah. And I think it's come so much into awareness in dating and in those first stages of meeting someone. And, it's such a difficult time, I think, in our culture to meet people because we have become so digitalized and people aren't versed in conversation. They're versed in swiping. They're versed in connecting physically first. And so we're not able to understand, like, why am I upset if they haven't called me back, or what happens when we sleep together, and why do I feel so weird? And it's so easy to put it on the other person.
Absolutely. Yeah, tell
So,
us more
which is what
about.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah. How do cultural societal attitudes towards body impact the effectiveness of somatic approaches, do you think?
Mm. Well, I think each person comes, like you're saying, with their history. And so if they're shamed even looking at their own body, or having less clothing on, sometimes we'll do some mirror work with people, with my clients, that we can just to see your own response. Like, how is it if you show more arm, or if you show more of your cleavage? What happens in you? What judgments come up? What conversations have you inherited about that are not necessarily yours, right? They came from your mother, or from your lineage, or from your culture, or your religion. So it's a really, again, a dismantling of what's inherited that I took on, and is that really how I feel? There's a big piece of work around that is, can be very gentle. It takes time, because it's not, I don't want to now push something else on another person, because you can inherit all kinds of conversations that are the opposite, like, oh, I should just be sexy and I should be like this. But that's not necessarily your truth. It's just another version of inheriting an external conversation or belief that isn't yours. So what feels good for you? What's your version of being feminine? What does it feel like for you? What feels true for you? It doesn't look like what mine looks like, for example.
Mm.
Or, what's your version of intimacy or sexiness for you?
And I suppose playing with that, because I'm thinking that, even as a woman, there's so much of our society, as you talk about, the goals of do the somatic work for abs, there's so much
Mm-hmm.
of the masculine in all of us. We live in a very masculine based culture. Um, there's something about exploring that softness.
Yes.
What is it like to be woman or
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there's a place for the softness, and then there's also a place for anger. I think anger is also a big topic where it gets pushed down, and you have anger management, and you have to manage your anger. And, I don't really like that word, because, again, anger is an energy, right? It's an energy that wants to move through us, and it's giving us information. And there's a way to express it consciously, and there's a way to express it unconsciously, right? So I think that's a distinction that we don't have. So when I can consciously connect with my anger and express, oh, wow, I'm angry because a boundary has been crossed, or I violated my own boundary, or you violated a boundary, that's conscious. But when I'm just yelling and screaming at you and not knowing why, that's unconscious. And then that needs to be managed. So I don't really like that word personally.
Mm. Yeah, again, I'm reflecting on my journey with
Mm,
you and through this
mm,
process, and I think, yeah, there was something really pivotal that happened with connecting to anger, and using the kind of
yeah.
mallet and the shouting no, and really just letting it come out in its full glory. There's something after that, almost like blowing the froth off a cup
Yes.
of coffee, that there was this softness underneath. And it almost felt like maybe that very kind of masculine projection
Hmm.
moves away, or people saying, why are you so angry? Actually, they're kind of letting it be and letting it come out.
Yes.
allowed me to very much sit in or reclaim that feminine space.
Yes, I so remember, because also anger is often a secondary emotion. It's what's covering, like you said, with your child, it's covering fear or pain, usually. I'm not saying that it's never anger. And when we don't express our anger in that conscious, clean way in its full capacity, it comes out sideways, meaning, there's like nasty remarks, you're nasty to your partner, there's little sarcasm. It just gets nasty, and you can see that in people. There's a way that it's always there under the surface. And so when we are free of it, then again, that energy has moved through us. And remember, the flip side of anger is passion. So if you aren't able to have your anger, you can't set boundaries, you can't stand for what's important for you, you can't really follow your passion, because it's all smushed down in the service of, oh my God, don't get angry, or manage your anger. So I would say it's about um, really being conscious about it and learning to be with it in a healthy way, and letting it show you what you need to know. I mean, there's a lot of angry women in the world.
I was going to say, I was going to say, I bet I wasn't the first, and I bet I wasn't the last. Because there's this piece that women aren't allowed to be, right?
Yes,
it just
yes.
bubbles under the surface. And I think it came out because I didn't have money for the parking machine, and I came into it, I was like, oh my God, I'm really frustrated that, and I'm scared I'm going to get a parking ticket, but I've just had to leave my car. And that was the way in. It was just wonderful to then really allow that to.
Yeah. And that was just a trigger. But what do you think road rage is? Road rage is people are so full to the brim, it has to come out. Otherwise, they would blow up. It's like the container is so full. And so it comes out in all kinds of unhealthy ways. So it's not the point to put it away, and it's true. Once you clear it, then you're able to be like, whoa, okay, so now I understand. This is really important to me. I need to learn how to communicate that in future, so that I can get my needs met and I can feel good in this relationship. And I think menopause is a huge catalyst for that. It brings up all the times in life that women have put their needs second, or done something that went against a boundary or a true need, and all of that comes up. Certainly it did for me, and that's what I hear. And it's a great opportunity to kind of clear the past, so that you can move forward with a cleaner slate, and more empowered. And it's not just about hot sweats and, HRT. It's about this real emotional transformational journey that I think isn't really spoken about.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think there's a real grieving piece that doesn't happen. Um, we have, well, I mean, I think that's societal. We have this real resistance to endings and grieving things that we have lost. So it's natural to grieve. Wow, I had this amazing body when I was in my 20s and I never appreciated it. It's easy to grieve. Maybe you wanted children, you didn't have them. It's easy to have all of that come up, but then it gets squashed down and covered over with just the physical symptoms. So when we can metabolize, and when I say metabolize, it's really allowing the emotion to come through you, and feeling like, what are you learning from the emotion? There's always something to be learned and integrated. Then you can let that go and leave it behind, and move forward again with this clean slate. Rather than carrying that, there's an anger towards society, there's anger towards men, there's anger towards, oh my God, my whole life I've been this way for other people and not for myself. So it's a real blessing. It can be, because our estrogen gets much lower, we're not so caring about bonding with people and worried about what we're going to say. That's why there's such a freedom in midlife, to be more free with what we say and how we say it, and we're not so taking care of other people. It's amazing.
Just to be ourselves and do our dance.
Yes. And I think, this generation of that we're living in now, I think we're parenting in a different way, and hopefully our children won't have to wait till midlife to have that experience, but they will know sooner to be able to speak their needs, and be with their emotions, and allow that to influence, how they live. That would be such a gift. Yeah. And I think women, we have so much more available to us in our experience
and that's
that
the
men
piece
don't have.
And that's the piece that I think is conditioned out of us, that
Yes.
connection to the divine
Yeah.
feminine,
Yeah.
because we all have to fit that very patriarchal system.
Yes. Yes.
That part of the learning is deconditioning that and becoming more intuitive and being much more embodied,
For
um,
sure.
in the softness. And we get a lot further when we come from that place of love than when we come from the very demanding masculine energy.
Why do you think women are so exhausted? Because we're so conditioned to operate like men. And we have
Yeah,
a
and
different nervous system, we have a different brain. Nothing works the
yeah,
same.
and I suppose society has meant that we have to adopt that because you're
Yeah.
raising kids, you're working, you've got to get this stuff done. We're not in the bosom of
No.
being
No. No.
being woman. So we're trying to kind of be both. We're trying to be a man and a, you
Yeah.
know,
And I was reading somewhere the other day how this whole thing about women's equality, and the conversation around it's not okay to just stay home and be a housewife, how all of that was part of, let's get them working, let's get them paying taxes, let's make it bad and wrong to stay at home and be in that kind of nourishing energy. And I'm not saying you can't do both, but I think what women miss is you can be masculine at work, but then you need to come home and have a practice that brings you into your feminine so that you inhabit both. Not don't come home to your man with your masculine energy, because it's not going to go well. You're not going to get what you want and need, and then it'll be his fault.
that makes a lot of sense. And I suppose that's hard to do, right? Because there's an expectation that both men and women play that role.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
the list of chores and stuff we've got to get done. We kind of are so ingrained
Yes.
in achieving. That's the school system from the moment that we're born, right? We have to feed that commerce. It is designed for us to feel broken and not good enough, and
Yeah, but there's also a
somatic therapy for our
misconception.
abs.
Exactly, but there's this misconception I can only achieve in masculine energy, which is not true, right? I can achieve in a feminine flow, in a soft way, in a different way than I can in my masculine. But I think that's the misconception.
Yeah.
I can do more. And then we wonder, oh, why am I not aroused? It's like, well, how can I be? I'm in this crazy energy all day long. There's no place for fluidity and sensory experiences and what I need to feel aroused. So it
And to,
doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be 5 minutes when you come home from work, you have 10 minutes, or you do something to get you out of that vibe.
and to rest. It's not okay to rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really interesting that even yeah, there has to be, if you're resting, well, watch a
You're
podcast.
lazy,
But
or
yeah, watch a podcast, do something. Like, who actually
you can't just
genuinely
rest.
has half an hour to do nothing, to drink a cup of tea and look at the trees, not be answering text messages?
Yep. It's just, you have to eat and do something. You have to, it's so ingrained. It's ridiculous. It's frightening. So, there's no wonder we're all crazy and stressed out and angry.
And I guess that comes from the Industrial Revolution, right? That everyone needs
Yes.
to
Yeah.
work.
And, the less the mom is home with the children, the more they can be controlled elsewhere. Yes.
What advice would you give therapists or individuals who are curious about kind of integrating somatic work into their lives or practice?
Well, I can't think of any modality where it wouldn't be useful.
Mm.
Because we're not just a head. I think we know that. So it not only will allow you to work deeper with your clients, but it will also inform how you connect with people, like you said earlier, how you connect with yourself, how you navigate in the world. When you're more connected to your truth, you don't have to walk around in the world like, oh, everybody's against me, or in all this old conditioning that we've been carrying or that we've been taught. So you're much more free. You're much more have a sense of self.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, I would say freedom is the number one thing.
Mm. And where do you see the future of somatic therapy in terms of what we are knowing through neuroscience and that the mind and body is one?
Yeah. Well, I think it's so amazing, just to see also, psychedelics coming more mainstream and being studied in universities and in science, and how useful that will be for future. And I would say in schools, I've also seen a lot of places where there's information and training for teachers and also for the children. Certainly in parenting, it's having a huge impact. And for me, that's all prevention, right? So if we can grow up young people to be more emotionally aware and knowledgeable, then obviously in future, maybe there won't be such a need for therapy.
Uh,
And we can all be out of a job.
yeah, yeah. Or in doing our work, we kind of heal I read somewhere, by doing your own work, you heal 7 generations behind and 7
Yes,
generations in front.
absolutely. Absolutely. When one of my dear friends was pregnant, we were very young, and I said, please, please, the greatest gift you can give your child is to do some therapy and deal all the stuff that you're carrying from your family. That's the greatest gift you can, not the which crib you buy and not the clothes. And, that's all nice, but, they're going to carry all that stuff that is unresolved in you.
Right.
So I think we're so blessed to live in this time, and it's really exciting. And, I wish that our parents had known more about this.
Yeah. Yeah, if there's one thing you've learned or one thing that you could share with the listeners that has been really powerful and important on your journey, what would that be?
The most powerful, well, I think what the somatic work has done for me is just given me permission to be myself, and that it's okay to be me, and that was really not how I grew up. And I think there's a grounding and a place to rest in that is, yeah, it's really indescribable. And there's nobody that can take that away from me. And how I live in the world is so different than how I did when I was younger. And that's what I want for all people, really, I guess. Yeah.
Linda, thank you so much. It has been really wonderful to talk to you this morning.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time and your wisdom. I've learned
Thank
lots.
you. Thank you for having me. And I'm so excited for you and to hear your podcast and lots of amazing conversations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You've been listening to The Psychedelic Couch. For more episodes, please follow me on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts, and find me on Instagram at The Psychedelic Couch and at Claire Faulkner Therapy, where I will be keeping you up to date on the latest episodes and information surrounding all things therapy, psychedelics, and expanded states.